All right, we'll give it a few minutes as we get everyone into the room. And we want to thank you for joining today. We know that there is a lot going on with the session starting today. It's a brand new year, a lot of new opportunities. Some things about this year are just carrying over, and hopefully we can move to success and completion some of the things that have been lingering from 2021 when we launch into new and more successful opportunities. So we appreciate you joining us with busy schedules at this time. One of the things that the Legislative Committee for WRPA has been talking about is just how overwhelming sometimes it is this time of the year trying to jump into the legislative process. So we really wanted to take the time to help folks get a little bit more comfortable about what you can or can't do. A lot of it is the can do side of it in order for all of us to be able to collaborate and work together moving forward. So first, a couple introductions. I am Roxanne Miles. I'm the Pierce County Parks Director, but I'm also the chair of WRPA's Legislative Committee. So we have other committee members who are on this call today that are going to speak to several different elements as well. So Brian, would you do a quick introduction?
Yeah, Brian Adams. I'm with Skagit County Parks and Recreation as the director here, and I am here to speak of the benefits of association and agent-driven lobbying, essentially, on our behalf.
Thank you, Brian. Mary?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Mary Dodsworth. I work with the City of Lakewood Parks, Recreation, and Community Services. I also work, I'm also the WRPA liaison to WRC, and I'll be chatting with you about Ledge Day.
Thank you. Paul?
Hi there, my name is Paul Simmons. I'm the Olympia Parks Arts and Recreation Director and past president of WRPA for about 2 more months, so I figure I should throw that title around while I still can. I guess I'm always the past president, but I'm the active past president right now. I'll be talking about when to contact your legislator and a little bit about relationship building and how to manage that relationship on an ongoing basis.
Perfect. Jen?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Jennifer Papich. I am the current WRPA president, and I work for the City of Spokane Parks and Recreation. And I will be talking just a little bit about the benefits of signing up for Lobby Day as a professional and an association.
Perfect. Doug?
Yes, good morning or good afternoon. We're getting close to afternoon. I'm Doug Levy. I'm your WRPA state lobbyist, and I'm just going to give you a little glimpse into why the legislature matters and how much of what they do really does affect you in Parks and Recreation. So happy to be here.
All right, and Tiffany?
Hi, Tiffany Hansel Martin, Executive Director for WRPA, and also just supporting the tech here. So excited for all of you to be here.
Thank you. Just, I mean, the span of the people who are on the call, there's a lot of veterans who have been part of the legislative committee, leading the legislative committee in the past presidents with WRPA, but there's also, I'm probably the newest of that group overall and really jumped into this role in order to learn more. So the fact that we all learn, I think, by doing, and the more contact exposure, the better. That's what this is about as well, just getting you as comfortable as possible to jump in and become more familiar about what's possible. We are going to look at and have Doug start with, what really matters to the state legislators? How do they impact our world? And so why is it important to know how to engage in the legislative process? I'm going to talk a little bit about the rules because I think we're all afraid to break them and want to become at least aware about what they are. And then Brian is going to get into some of that benefits of having an association and how can being involved through your association be compatible with whatever you are able to do or aren't able to do within your agency itself. Paul's going to give us some of his best tips and tricks that have come out of really building a strong relationship with your legislature. And then Mary is going to give us some of the highlights of what's coming forward regarding Legislative Day, how you can be involved in that process as a pretty easy introduction if you haven't done it before. And Jen's going to give us some closing just thoughts about the value for WRPA in being able to have strong legislative involvement overall. So with that, we will dive in. Don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat, raise your hand, slow us down if you want to go over something, because we want to make sure this is something that you can apply and utilize in moving forward to get involved. So with that, Doug, you want to kick us into how the state legislature impacts our day-to-day?
Sure, thanks, Roxanne. And again, hello to everybody, and thanks for carving out time. You know, the first fundamental thing I would say is that all of you as local agencies, you're essentially, what we call creatures of the state. And by that, I mean that much of the authority that local agencies derive has to come from the state. Any taxing authority that we have is typically extended by the state or revised by the state. So there's a very symbiotic relationship that way. And then there are several ways as you look at each legislative session. Think about the fact that there's typically around 2,000 bills that get introduced in the legislature every session, which is kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. Only about 1/5 or so of those are ever going to make it into law, but a lot of bills are introduced. And so when you think about what impacts us, first of all, I'd say one of the biggies is in the capital budget. That's where the legislature pays for so many of the grant programs that both affect you and that can benefit you if you're an applicant. So the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program, youth athletic facilities, the aquatic lands enhancement account, the non-highway off-road vehicle account, boating facilities program, on and on. So there's a number of those things in the capital budget. So that, that bears directly onto ways that you all try and improve and compete for funding for the infrastructure to serve your agencies. The other thing is that in the operating budget, while we are less impacted by that, remember that the legislature does house some programs that we care about. One of them is the No Child Left Inside program. So there's some of these things the legislature does in the operating budget that we have to watch. There's some of the things the legislature does in the transportation budget that we have to watch around funding for trails or safe routes to schools or bicycle pedestrian grant programs. We're increasingly concerned about the crosswalk between parks and healthy communities. And so, thinking about what the legislature does with Department of Health and programming to keep communities healthy. You may remember we had a bill last session we called the Parks RX legislation to try and even create a tighter bond between the value of parks and healthy outdoor activities. There's also a lot of things the legislature does around purchasing or land use or affordable housing and homelessness that touch you either directly or indirectly. So while there's a lot of bills that we don't necessarily have to pay a lot of attention to, many of the things that come through the system, we at least have to keep our eyes on. And invariably, there's going to be bills every week at hearings throughout the legislative sessions that we'll want to track. So there's a lot of reasons for you to pay attention to the legislature, in some cases to want the legislature to help you, in some cases to want the legislature not to do things to you. So for a lot of reasons, we have to pay close attention to the goings on in a session, whether it's a short one like we're about in now at 60 days or or a longer odd year session, those are 105 days. So that's a quick snapshot for you all. And then I'm happy to turn it back to Roxanne and answer any questions you may have.
All right, well, it looks like so far so good. And I think we'll be referencing, I think, some of those things that Doug introduced and talked about. It is a short session this year, but time flies by quickly, and really having the time to prepare for the longer session, especially where the capital budgets and many of those grant programs are being funded. But there's a lot of rules. One of the things that we have before the legislature this year, but also did a webinar about last week, was just how many of the RCWs talk about sales tax and its use. And so how much money you get and what you can use that money for is often clearly governed by the legislative process. I know for myself, when I was given the opportunity to do this, I also had to recognize and learn pretty quickly, what can I do as an association member? What can and can't I do just as a Pierce County Parks employee? And what are the rules around that? So I'm going to share again, this for me is primarily the source document, because I think it's helpful to be able to know where you can go get the information that gives you the best understanding of what you can and can't do. So hopefully you all see this okay. It really is an email that I can forward to all of you, but I wanted to cut and paste in and show some of the key terminology that is out there. A lot of you find on the Public Disclosure Commission website, and that's what that links to there. But the lobbying is defined about really attempting to influence specific legislation. So that's one of the keys. We can talk about our industry, we can talk about the benefits, until there really is a bill, or in, you know, the budget proposals themselves end up being wrapped into something that the legislature is going to vote on. You can talk really very freely about our industry, your projects, your goals, and your needs. So when we start to try to influence to get something passed or defeated, many of these things come into play. Notice I also highlighted that it says face-to-face contact. Now we're doing Zoom now, and that counts as face-to-face direct conversation, where you're going to be meeting with a legislature to try to do that influential action. And that really is the objective of the meeting. It's not to educate or explain, which we do quite frequently in our world. It really is trying to get a certain outcome. So those are three real key elements: that it's an active bill, that you're trying to influence the outcome, and that it does involve that face-to-face or person-to-person discussion, that contact itself. I put those other bullets, which is why the emphasis is on the face-to-face, because it says for the purpose of reporting, it doesn't include telephone calls, which can still be an interactive dynamic. It doesn't include letters. So it also doesn't include any testimony that you've done before a committee when they're asking you to be a subject matter expert, or they're asking you to share what the impact is going to have on you as a park and recreation provider. So this is why them being aware and you already having a relationship can be really beneficial, because if they're asking you to come forward, you are doing so in response to their request for information. It also really is at the state level, not about federal legislation or local legislation. Some of you might be, in a city that's inside a county, and so your needs in order to lobby to that county, you are able to do under this without any reporting requirement, or in general, the concern that you are misusing public funds in order to influence legislation, because you can always educate. And any of those of you who have done bond measures and those type of things, the ability to share what is in that measure and allow people to make their own decisions is a very common strategy and usually the direction that you're given as an employee when something is out on the ballot itself, right? Now, elected officials, that really is one of the roles that they have directly. So most of us are looking at this from the lens of a staff member in and of ourselves. This link here is on the PDC's page, and I really just think it synthesizes the basic information that you might want that really applies to approach. It again calls out some of what we've talked about. What is that definition of lobbying itself, and being really clear that there's a certain act of legislation, there's a certain bill that you're focused on. You're also then having that objective of getting it rejected or adopted. It can be, the time that you spent is usually just another piece. It's not that you can't do it as much as you do need to account for the time that you spend doing that type of activity. This L5 lobbying report in most agencies, it really goes to elected officials. It might go to, the county executive or to your mayor. One of the things that I just disclosed to the county executive is that in taking on this role, I might be having more contact with legislators. And so one of the things that I was showing you is there is a quarterly report, and all I have to put into that report is the date, who I had contact with. They do specifically ask for a bill number. And so if there's not a bill that you were having contact around, just the fact that you had a conversation or they came to your ground opening or any of those type of things really doesn't have to be included. And then it does talk about whether there was an outcome or action that was taken based on it in itself. So keeping track of that report is an important piece, but again, these basics are just important to keep in mind to have you relax a little bit and being able to talk to your agency about what you've done or are thinking about doing. The RCW, I clicked out this particular one that is listed as about what are you complying and reporting on. And it really shows that here, if you've limited your time based on requests or only for education, or they've asked you to come do it, you don't have a huge burden. Also, one of the key things is most of the time when you reach out, you get very little time from a legislator. Most of the time they're in 15-minute bookings. And even when we go as a group, and the group might be just promoting Parks and Recreation or opening up a conversation with a legislator, you don't need to dive into the details of that. But this item number 5, if you restrict your lobbying activities, and they're true lobbying activities, to no more than 4 days or parts of 4 days during any 3-month period, and whose total expenditures during such 3-month period for on behalf of any one or more members of the legislature or state elected officials or public officers collectively do not exceed $25. So we're having a number of trainings. You might be spending more time talking and thinking about the legislative process right now, but if you're not actually lobbying for parts of more than 4 days in a 3-month period, you're not going to be in any threshold where you have a reporting accountability, and your focus is just going to be more, am I speaking with the right hat on? Am I doing things that my own agency allows me to say and do and that we have a position on? Or am I speaking under the association, which then gives you that latitude of separation as well. So that was a quick overview. Hopefully you saw the tools and some of the salient points. Are there questions or concerns about your authority or right to lobby and what you need to do if you actually do lobby more than those 4 days on a specific bit of legislation? If anybody does want me to forward this email directly to you, because it does have the links and those points, and that's something that would be helpful to you, just add it to the chat and let me know, and I'd be happy to provide it. All right, with that said, I'm going to then hand it off to Brian to talk more about that kind of line between association and agency.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk too technical about all that, but just maybe give a couple of examples of times where our work has benefited our communities or our efforts. So just wanted to speak a little bit to that. Roxanne, by the way, I love your background picture, and I love how whatever you do, it looks like the wind is blowing at your hair. So it gives us the feeling that you're out there in the elements. Anyway, I know lobbying can have bad connotations, so we can refer to it as we like: government relations, grassroots advocacy, whatever we might want to call it. But let me tell you that advocacy through WRPA allows us as informed individuals to share our knowledge, our expertise, and our professional experience, and to speak collectively for our communities. There is tremendous competition for the limited amount of funds in any given budget cycle, and there are dozens of organizations that are advocating for funds and law that benefit their individual causes. So many of these organizations have competing interests. One year, I was following the Realtor Association around the state capitol as they were espousing their opposition to real estate excise tax. And as we know, taxes, although they have bad connotations, they're important to what we do. And those collective funding mechanisms can elevate the opportunities and the livability of our communities. And it's vital in what we do. So it's up to us to remind our elected officials of all the great park infrastructure that exists and the value it brings to our people in our communities that are buying homes or living in our community. Most people buying homes are interested in the proximity to parks and trails, right? So if we aren't there to advocate for our interests as a collective body, we won't have the success we have shared over the years. There's a power in numbers, and our presence really does make a difference. Most of our parks in Skagit County have RCO funding associated with them. And as a body, we need to showcase our success, bring attention to the matters that are important to us, and to build positive relationship with our senators and representatives. We are the grassroots, and we need to advocate from the bottom up. Several years ago, we made a very strong pitch to WWRC that ended up with a very successful funding package. And somehow, in the fast and fury that happens in the final days of the budget, the ALEA funding was cut substantially, either funding one project or no projects. I can't remember. Doug might remember. I began working with Doug right away that year to strategize the solution. I wrote to all the representatives in my district and those on key committees. In the following session, bringing back this funding became a key platform of ours. Doug was able to determine that there was dedicated funds from shellfish licenses that could have or should have supported ALEA. We testified at hearings and kept the ball in the air. And after a barrage of support from our association and individuals in a short non-budget year, the ALEA projects were fully funded. And not only that, they placed sufficient funding for every project on the list. It had broad support from both sides of the aisle. And later in that spring, we invited one of the key capital budget advocates, that's Norma Smith, to our annual WRPA meeting. And we presented her with an award. Now, if any of you know Norma, she wasn't always the biggest supporter of acquisition and habitat funding. But by making this a part of her legacy, we helped bring a new ally into our camp in the following years. It's important to let our reps know when our success is directly the result of their support. Our associations can be involved at many levels: advocacy, acknowledgement, recognition, whatever it is. And on the agency side, while our association plays a key role, we want to make sure that we coordinate our message with our individual agencies. Most cities and counties have their own lobbyists, and it's important that our local government is advocating for our core interests. Our local agencies don't always have the expertise and the understanding of the issues that we might, but our local officials need to understand that our issues and how we're understand all of our issues and how our work benefits their constituents. If our representatives are hearing a barrage of support and understand how our interests benefit their communities, it will help us when deliberations begin and our decisions are being made. Their decisions especially are being made. Our work advances the collective infrastructure, and it provides benefits to those who enjoy the outdoors and are committed to protecting the natural resources. I just think it takes a village. So we need to make every effort to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction and all have some synergies moving forward. And that's, I don't have a lot of the legal side of things. I appreciate Roxanne, providing some of that perspective, but I just, in the amount of time I've had here, I know there's a lot of examples we all have of success stories based on all of our hard work. So it's more of a rallying plea. It takes a village.
I might just jump in to add to what Brian said when he was talking about the Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account, because I want all of you to understand how much of an influence the projects in your area can have on your legislators. I know Paul's probably going to talk about that later, but Brian mentioned, I think it was from back in 2018 when the legislature made up for the shortfall with ALEA and funded all the way down a list because they became so fond of the benefits of that program. And even last session, the legislature at one point was only going to fund partway down the list, and there were 3 projects left underneath it from King County and Kirkland and the Port of Anacortes. And because legislators started hearing about that, and legislators from King County and who represent Kirkland started getting a hold of the capital budget writers, the legislature again went all the way down the list in 21-23. And that's in part because of our WRPA was out there banging the drum, but I would say in large measure because legislators have a fondness for the outdoor projects in their districts that you bring to them. They know they have value. So, your ability to affect results is sometimes you may not even know how significant it is, but it is a very big deal.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I think the one of the benefits I've seen is just it's awareness, right? The more we're in these conversations, the more we become aware. And the nice part about there being an association is sometimes people throw ideas, hey, I'm running into this issue. Is anybody else having this issue? Because they know they might not be able to truly get the legislature as a whole to carry about something that is only impacting their individual district. And the more it kind of becomes universal, or even we test different ideas, not everything ends up going into a bill level, but we end up having enough conversations to find a solution. And so, last year there were conversations about invasive species. And if you are introducing something, it definitely doesn't need to go through the association, but when we have an awareness that it's moving forward, then we start including that awareness or general support on our list of activities, and incrementally more and more people might become involved in moving forward. This year there's a derelict vessel, we're not even pushing behind it, but the state has funds in order to take care of boats that are abandoned in our waters. And all of us said, yeah, that's a huge issue. We don't have to usher this through, but it is something that we definitely want to be able to support. And so because I had that awareness because of WRPA, I was even able to say to the county's lobbyists, hey, this is one that I'm looking for. I expect to see there'll be a number. There's some resources that they're asking, and we get cut off far too soon. So if you can help keep an eye on that, it's allowed me to actually engage our county lobbyists in a much more thoughtful way, because I'm aware of these issues. And now when he's trying to build the county's agenda, he is setting up one-on-one appointments to me to find out what Parks wants to have included in that list, as opposed to just maybe human services or planning and public works, or if you're not even sure who's crafting an agenda. And if you're part of a city that you're not sure has spent time crafting legislative agendas, at least if you have the WRPA one, you can say, I now can be a bridge that helps get information that we need, that can help our city, that can help our system if we connect in with the association and what's moving forward. So the other part is I say, here's the association's agenda. I'm going to be speaking as an association member to all of these things. Does the county want to get behind some of them, or are there any that you have concerns about me speaking to that you want me to be just clear which hat I'm wearing, so that I'm not using the county's capital on something that the county isn't going to be as direct a beneficiary of as other members of WRPA. So just that nice ability to open up, I think, conversations and build relationships is something that strengthens both on the agency side as well as the association side as you move forward. Great. And I see Doug is adding some other, the bill that I referenced, he's got all the tools. And one of the things we're talking about on WRPA's website, his weekly reports come out that just show you where bills are at. This is definitely something where it's a moving target. As he said, it shrinks from a big number down to a small number. And we do what we can to build awareness and influence along the process. And they don't always turn out the way we want. So it's not that anything's ever guaranteed, but unless you're in there having the conversations, then the process easily moves past you quicker than you would like. So Paul, do you want to pick up on that and give us some of your tips about when and how to engage legislators?
I'd be happy to, and feel free to throw something at the screen if I talk for too long. I tend to be a bit chatty at times, but I do have to kind of second Brian's all call, just asking for more hands on deck. And there's some names on this call that I don't recognize, and nothing makes me happier than seeing new faces join our efforts down here in Olympia, where I happen to live and work, because the more the merrier. And whether you're coming in for a one-stop shop to check out this legislative day and spread the message of how important parks are, or whether you're looking to make this kind of a new priority and part of your work moving forward for the next, for the duration of your career, any and all help is appreciated. And so, don't let some of the lifers intimidate you if that's not what you're interested in. And also know that anything you do is going to have some level of positive influence. So, we all have our limits and we all have other things that we need to be doing. And so it's just a matter of finding out what works for you and your agency. Roxanne was talking about wearing hats, whether you're speaking on behalf of the association or your agency. And I think that's a really important aspect. Everything, I've been doing legislative stuff for probably, I'm pushing 20 years or 15 to 20 years, somewhere in that range. I've lost track. And probably the most important piece of advice I have is to check in with your leadership. If you're not a director, check in with your director. If you are a director, check in with your city or county manager, whoever it is, that's kind of coordinating your agency's legislative efforts, because your elected officials are likely somehow connected to the state's elected officials. And so if you're out speaking and advocating for something that they're not supportive of, that can get you in hot water. And it's really important. Your directors and your city managers and your county managers should be able to help kind of coach you through that. And I've had times when my city manager has said, hey, stand down on that. You know, I know it's important for your industry and I know it's important for your field, but we have a couple elected officials that aren't in support of that. So at that point, you know, I let Doug know, hey, this isn't the one I'm going to carry the flag for, but you know, good luck and Godspeed to everybody who is. And I just, it's an important thing to remember. But I don't know if that was like the question though that I was supposed to speak to. So I guess I'll get maybe more on point which is, you know, when and how do you make contact with your legislators? And I kind of want everybody to take a second and put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Have you ever had somebody come and ask you for something? And what does that feel like when they come and ask you for something? And, you know, is this a stranger? Is this somebody who's taken the time to understand me and my business and why I would want to give it to them? You know, is this somebody who's just coming in and expecting the world and totally tone deaf for everything else that's going on? You know, just kind of take some time and put yourself in their shoes for a minute. And I think if you can do that, that's like an important step one to any type of outreach that you might do, because at the end of the day, we're all going in there to advocate for parks and our local interests and the things that are going to help us better serve the community. And in the end of the day, we're going to better serve their constituents. And frankly, they should care about that. They should care about that. That doesn't always mean they do, but they should. And it's our job to go in there and help draw those connections. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day about the recreation industry, and one of my favorite things to do is to teach people about all the little things behind the scenes. All the people that don't understand our industry, all they see is the day camps and the dodgeball and the fun stuff. They don't know the behind the scenes work. And that's really the exciting part of what we do. Legislators are in that same boat. They don't have the time, unless they've grown up in our industry, they don't have the time to know why we did. So it's our job to help them draw those connections. How do parks fit into the larger community? How do parks make their constituents' lives better? Why should they support what we're doing? And I think first and foremost, that's like goal number one. Is just helping them understand who we are. We're representing parks. We're a resource for them and we can help them. And by the way, we also are actively working on things that they can influence and support us as well. So I think that context and overall relationship and thinking about it in terms of the long game, I think is just an important frame of mind to have before you do any outreach or any ask or kind of go into any room. I would say, you know, everything is online these days. So it's really easy to take 10 or 15 minutes and just get a general sense of who the legislators are, you know, what party they are. I wouldn't go into anything that's, you know, partisan, but at least having an idea of what party they represent, having an idea, you can look and see really quickly what committees do they serve on. You can oftentimes read their bio, which is usually summarized. You can find out were they a city council member. That's going to give them a different insight. Because a lot of them were, and that's going to, you know, were they a school board member? Are their passions education? You know, so you can really quickly see through just a little bit of quick research what their priorities are, and doing some of that homework sets you up. I'll give one kind of war story that I had that was pretty early in my career, and I walked into a legislator's office, and we had in the city I worked for, we had a 50-year-old pool that was falling apart, and I really wanted a new pool. And the legislator worked in another community that had this beautiful, brilliant new pool. And so I went in and I said to the legislator, I said, "Oh man, I absolutely love the swimming facility. I would love to have that in our community. Really good job." Thinking I was being complimentary to the individual, and he scowled, kind of looked down at me, scowled over his desk, slammed his fist on the table and said, "I paid dearly for that pool." And my buddy Ray Towery, who some of you know, was sitting next to me and kind of laughed it off with humor and said, "So I take it you're not a swimmer." And we kind of laughed and kind of worked through that moment a little bit, but you don't always know how legislators are going to respond to our asks, and you kind of got to be prepared to just be on your feet. And we're never going to win that guy over. And I kind of knew that going into it, and I know it even more going out of it, and I still know it even today because he's still in the legislature and still comes and speaks from time to time. But that's the reality of the work we're doing. That doesn't mean that I couldn't still talk about the importance of parks and the importance of the work we do and those connections and the value of swimming and all of those things. That's one meeting after like 15 years. So I don't want to scare anybody off that, you're going to have somebody snap at you. But they all have opinions, they all have strong feelings, and they all have passions. And so again, kind of getting back to just taking the time to understand what makes them tick and try to learn a little bit about them. It's important. The other thing too is that these legislative day meetings are snapshots. They're 10 to 15 minutes. And you're not going to change the world in 10 to 15 minutes, unfortunately. So just kind of putting that into perspective and managing your expectations. And say, okay, so what can I do in 10 to 15 minutes? How can I start and foster a long-term relationship, and realize that a year from now, I'll be back again for another 10 to 15 minutes, and a year from that, back again. And hopefully the legislator's still there. And by this point, we've started to foster a relationship. So legislative day is a really good day to kind of develop that base relationship. But then the other thing I would say is that there's other times and events when you can make contact with your legislators. If you, for example, got an RCO grant for a project and you're doing a grand opening, you should absolutely be inviting all of your delegation to that grand opening. And you should be coordinating with your local elected officials to make sure that they have an opportunity to speak, because that's, in the end of the day, that's a win for them, and they may not always draw that connection. And they like to show up to these events. That's where they're able to speak to their constituents directly and kind of show off the work that they're doing. So any ribbon cuttings or grand openings, particularly when it's things that the legislators have been involved in. I have, through my Rotary, we do shared meetings occasionally with the Kiwanis, and some of our legislators are in those groups. So finding out where there might be service clubs is one way I've drawn connections to legislators. So that's really good ways to have informal conversations and kind of catch these guys when they're not necessarily. You want to be careful and conscientious of it, because you don't want to blindside them when they're not expecting it. So again, thinking about from that frame of mind of how do you like to be asked for things, and what's that approach look like. Also, too, I think gratitude goes a long ways. We're often asking for things. We're asking them to support this bill and that bill, and we're asking them to take time to understand our industry, and we're asking them to maybe not pass that bill because that's going to hurt us really bad. And so we're always ask. And one of the things I've tried to do is, in a year when we have grants on the line, we go in and we advocate strong for that. In a year that we don't have grants on the line, I like to go in and have some type of thank you. Like we've got small little frames and framed ribbons from our openings, and then did a big kind of thank you image, and just had some, or we would bring them a piece of something, or a picture from a grand opening, or maybe a letter that a constituent wrote us that talked about, how this impacted their lives. Going in and saying thank you, I think, is something that probably doesn't happen a lot. So it can be really impactful, especially for the long-term relationship building. And I think the other thing too, so this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll kick it over to Roxanne, because I'm probably way past my 10 minutes, but don't underestimate the role of the legislative assistant. The LAs are the gatekeepers to the legislators, and taking the time to figure out what their names are, what their processes are. Some of them, for example, like a couple of years ago, they said no more paper. Don't bring paper. Don't bring anything paper. And if we brought any type of paper and tried to hand it to the legislator, we were on the shit list for the poop list for the LA. Sorry. It's just, that's just one example of, having that good relationship with the LA is going to help with access. It's going to help you understand the schedule, and it's going to help you. And by the way, sometimes the legislators may be so busy that you end up meeting with the LA, and that's okay. Don't be offended by that. The LAs have a lot of influence, and share that information, and treating them just as important as the legislator really can help in terms of helping you in future years. So the relationships with both, hopefully that's kind of what you were looking for, Roxanne. If I missed anything, or if I got off topic, sorry about that, but hopefully that helps.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Just one of the things I'd highlight, because there was a lot of great gems that Paul put in there, is just remembering that legislators are people too. They care about their communities, which is why they ran for the positions. And just kind of paying attention to what they are promoting and getting on their newsletter lists, just listening to what matters to them, because a lot of them are going into a 2-year or a 4-year election cycle. Some have been there, reelected multiple times, but especially the newer folks, they are kind of uncomfortable with this process and trying to find their legs underneath them themselves. So if you have 10 or 12 or 20 years of experience in this field, you are a gem for them to get to know. And the more you have a sense of what matters to them and just take every advantage for a general introduction and contact that's not the ask, so that when it gets to the place of something that you do need to bring forward, you already know kind of what their position is on different things and how basically what you're bringing them can help them make the impact that they want to see going on in their community. And I think Leaf Line Coalition did a trail ride, and as I've learned talking to a lot of our legislators, even those who aren't really tax friendly, they are out there recreating in our parks. They are riding on our trails and paths. They love having those in the community. What they are concerned about, right, is what's the impact and how do those get funded? So aligning with each other, forming that alliance around the end result, which everyone saw over COVID. And now that there's some influx of funding, they're kind of ready to, when we're saying, hey, what are the opportunities? How can you shift things to funnel more of those resources into making these things either sustainable or happen in the community? They're kind of going, oh, aha, good. Thank you for raising that for me, because they are overwhelmed with everything coming through the funnel, and us helping to bring things top of mind make all the difference for them. Okay. Any questions for Paul on that? So real briefly, before I hand this over to Mary, I just wanted to let you know and show you some of the tools that you can find on the WRPA site, or will be made available in the near future. But this just kind of goes back to one of the benefits that your association can provide you, because we don't all have the time or the ability to develop all the resources or find the resources that we want. There's the big picture. So there are a couple tools that we have already created. If you don't have a legislative agenda and you're wondering what even to take forward or to consider about whether it would have value for you, do you see the legislative agenda? Or are you still seeing my email?
Email.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh,
Okay. Did it go? Sorry, newbie speaking and bringing. Yeah, so that should be open on top now. We have a list of priorities, and this comes from the members. We float this out there. We have a number of different kind of meetings throughout the year. We've been using an administrator's call, but if at any point something is brewing that you don't see on it, or even wondering, is it a legislative thing? That is something that you can reach out to myself or Doug Levy on. Like I said, I've provided this list directly to the county's lobbyists. So one, he knows what the association is pushing. He can see an alliance if it is something where the county wants to be at the forefront. Many of these items are general in that there's not really a bill yet, but if there's any money that supports parks doing, healthy and active communities, if there's any money that's going to come in related to active transportation dollars and climate change and how we contribute to that, we've really put, I think at WRPA's level, a pretty global level of support, which has actually helped driven some understanding that maybe your city or county knows that, oh, okay, what's going on with that big tent coalition? What might be coming forward in those areas? Because they might not have thought of how it could benefit parks or benefit the community if they get on board and align with it. So if you don't already have your own legislative agenda, know that WRPA has one, and you might be able to grow and get involved in that process at some point. Okay. We also created a couple tools, and these tools really come directly from NRPA, a few of them, in that they create great materials, and we always call it the case for support. And right now, you know, the words are about equity and how are we helping people with fewer resources get access to places and spaces where they can be physically fit, where their mental health needs can be met. And so again, NRPA does this research. We just found a way to pull out what we thought were the most compelling bits of information and are including them in the packets that we're taking forward to the legislators, and are ones that you can use at your city council level or your county council level as well. We did another one, just how parks fit into COVID recovery, and Tiffany will be posting these on the website, and they will be part of the Ledge Day packet. So I'm not going to highlight quite all of them. This one is on parks as critical infrastructure, because we felt that all this Build Back Better and all this America Rescue Plan funding got, you know, funneled to water quality and sewer, definitely important infrastructure, but definitely wanted to say, you know, parks are important critical infrastructure as well. And our system is backlogged now, and, you know, not getting the highest rate as far as what infrastructure can be. And if you want to reinvest in that infrastructure now, there's a bill that's coming up that's really critical. And how do you make sure parks are part of any decisions as we move forward to build and make our communities stronger? There is a very specific fact sheet, again, if we want to try to influence particular legislation, and that's what this does, but it really describes to people what this House bill is about. So this is the one, because there is a bill associated with it, that you just want to be thoughtful. And for the most part, you have a lot of 15-minute opportunities or group opportunities to talk to a state representative about what's in this bill. But there's information that might be helpful for you to make your own case when it comes to your own budget request or your local lobbying, or if you do have a federal lobbyist who needs to have information to try to influence that federal funding and what's in those packages, you're able to tackle on and let them know what we're trying to accomplish here and use that information for the benefit of your agency. So that, I just wanted to make sure you know that we do create those tools. And if you're struggling with a particular case for support, like you don't feel like your voice is being heard, or you're not getting traction with people understanding the value of what you do, using NRPA's materials, turning to WRPA for materials and letting us know, hey, this is what where we're running into the roadblock, then we can work together on trying to find the ways to help pass that roadblock as we move forward. Any questions on that? Again, Tiffany will make sure you have access to all these materials. All right, I'm going to shift over to Mary, and then right after Mary, Jen Papich, to give you next step opportunities.
Great, thanks Roxanne, and thanks everybody for hanging in there. I'm going to share a little bit about Legislative Day. So Legislative Day is coming up next week. It's going to be here before we know it. It's on Thursday, January 20th, and we really would love for you all to participate and to get, you know, other people in the profession to participate, and also people that represent your organizations. You know, it might be your soccer club or your outdoor groups or your foundations, but everyone's invited to participate. So we really want you to sign up and put you in the loop. You will be assigned to meetings for your specific districts. And if you're interested in doing more, we have some key areas that don't have people assigned, so we can use your support there to help get the word out. So more to come on that. But Just so you know, it's a virtual event, like everything in our universe these days. But we did do it last year and it worked really well. It was super smooth and it really allowed a lot more people to participate. The one thing I miss is that, it's raining and you're running from building to building and meeting to meeting and back and forth. And so that part, you don't get your steps in, but this virtual way of doing it works really, really well and will help you be super successful. It's not scary. Even if you've never done it before, this is the year to get involved. And we do have a help desk and a room to check in if you need support throughout this process. But as Paul said, and I think Roxanne mentioned as well, this year we've heard the legislative folks are just getting so much request for information and sessions and hearings and caucuses and all this kinds of things. You're going to probably be meeting this year with staff versus the actual legislator or the senator, which is not a bad thing. Don't feel like you're on the naughty list or the B list. They are really those folks that can help you get your information to the right place. They are the keepers of the gateway. They are the ones that help organize the information, and they're just as important really as that direct contact with the legislative individual. So be ready that you may not actually be meeting with your legislative representative. We will give you a script to help you focus, to help you get started or break the ice. You will only have 10 or 15 minutes that will go by so quickly. So be ready for a very fast and furious meeting. And there won't be a lot of time for, miscellaneous. You don't have to worry about trying to, find out if they like dogs or, this or that. And after the first one, it'll be easy to get through it. I sometimes will do 3 or 4, during the day. And like I said, after the first one, it's a piece of cake. You can just do it really easy. So you're going to start by introducing yourself. There'll be a lead for each session. And so you'll get that information. You'll know who's in your group. And there'll be a lead for each session. So that person will start by introducing themselves, talk about where you work or what organization you're with. Also share if you're a constituent. If you live in their district, they really like to talk to their constituents so that they know you're not just representing, your work, livelihood, and organization, that you're also an individual that lives in the community as well. You may not start off by introducing everybody in the room. That takes a lot of time, but just know if other people are going to be speaking, they can introduce themselves at that time. Again, it just takes time, and you don't want to waste the time, everybody chit-chatting on, what street they live on. You really want to get your message across and get that information to them. Give everybody a chance to speak, because everybody has something to say. And again, you'll get that list in advance. You may have a chance to even email as a group in advance to talk about, who's going to do what of the presentation. You want to thank them, starting off with, this is an off session. And so we really want to make sure we're thanking them for the work they did last year. We got $100 million in the WWRC program, which all of us have maybe used for our local parks and trails. We had YAF that was heavily supported, Land and Water Conservation Fund. All of our grant programs were just heavily funded last year. And so really thank them. And you may want to chat about a project that was funded by those funds, or maybe a project you're getting ready to start planning for or starting to implement, so they can see how those resources really are being used in their districts. And they love that too. And then also, the work that's being done with equity, the work that's being done with Parks RX, the study that's being done throughout the community. A lot of work is happening right now. There's just a lot of resources towards Parks and Recreation. We just want to say thank you for that and recognize how important it is for our communities. I'll talk to you a little bit about a couple of the resources where you can find that information out if you're not that familiar with it, or maybe you're new to an agency and you don't know all the great work that's been done in the past. But anyway, you're going to have a short and sweet time to get through all of these things and just figure out what messages that you want to share. And again, there'll be a script, so you'll know exactly sort of the bill numbers and the different topics and who the right person is to share that information. Now, WRPA and the Washington Recreation Wildlife Coalition, who we're partnering on Ledge Day, we're doing it as a joint session because we have a lot of the same agendas and the same issues, is that they're going to have already shared a packet with your legislator or your legislative aide. So they're going to have all that information in advance. And I'll also share with you a couple places that you can find that. But just because they've got that information in advance doesn't mean they're going to ask you for it again. You may say, they may ask you for some specific detailed information, or is there a handout on that? Or can you get me more information on that? Or can you show me what the design looks like for this trail or this park that you're going to be working on? Just say, or they might ask you something you don't know anything about. You haven't heard of it. You don't know anything about it. And that's okay. Just say, I don't have that information. I'll get back to you. But make sure you write that down and get back to them, because they want you to know that you are a reliable person, that you have access to good information. And again, if you don't know what that information is, there's going to be a whole slew of people that you can check with to get that information to share with them. So we'll get more information to them. We want to be the experts in the field. We want them to know that we are there to help them advocate for whatever. Paul had talked about a swimming pool. I'm not an aquatics person. I don't have a lot of information on aquatics, but if the legislative person called me and said, hey, there's this situation going on in my district, or there's this topic I don't know about, it'd be like, I don't have that expertise, but I know people in your association that do. So you just can get them that information. You can get them the expert that can speak the lingo and can share all that bits and pieces of information to them. And again, you want them to come to us. And it's so amazing, because those of us that have been in the biz for a long, long time, nobody ever called us about this stuff. We would get word on legislation that was happening that would significantly impact our work, and they weren't ever talking to WRPA about it. Now they're lining up to talk to WRPA about it. They know that we can make it happen, that we're going to have great insight on the unintended consequences and other things like that. So anyway, WRPA has a real voice, and Doug Levy, of course, has been an amazing resource, but we want them to come to us so that they know that they can get the right information and make good decisions. We don't want them making decisions without our input, because then we have to deal with the unintended consequences, and it's not always great. But anyway, there's lots of information out there. RCO has amazing resources. They've got studies that they've done on economic impact. They've got great maps that show things like, specific to a neighborhood park, the low-income areas, health disparities, other kinds of information that can help you make your case. They're working right now on equity in parks and recreation. We're going to get some great information on that. There's regional facility data. Lots of good studies out there. WWRC, which is the Wildlife Recreation Coalition, they are going to provide a Google Drive that's going to have all of our handouts. The things that Roxanne showed you today, there's going to be, a click. You can watch a mock skit, like that's a video that says this is what an example of a Ledge Day meeting might look like. You're going to have maps. You're going to have bios of all your legislators, as Paul talked about. You're going to have lists of previously funded projects for all of by district. So you can, again, great resource with tons of information. And then WRPA, our webpage, also has an advocacy link. And I think that Tiffany's showing you right now. So we have our webpage. There's an advocacy menu button. We'll have webinars regarding trainings, Doug's weekly reportings, the handouts, initiatives, all kinds of things happening. You can see it's quite detailed, and you can get all kinds of information on that. So it's another great resource. So there's no reason for you not to participate. There's no reason for you to be scared to participate. And again, we really need your voice. We need representation from across the state to show how important the work is that these legislators are doing to get the resources to us so that we can do that important work in our community. So happy to answer your questions, but you do need to sign up for Ledge Day if you want to participate, and then we'll plug you in. If you've never done it before and you just want to shadow, that's awesome. That's how most of us started. And again, you can just kind of it's virtual, so you can zoom in, be in the room, show a presence, learn a little bit more, and your Parks and Recreation, in 5 seconds, you're going to be an expert and you'll be ready to lead the next meeting. So we really value your participation and hope that you'll support this year. Any questions?
Thank you, Mary. Perfect. And as she mentioned, it's tag team. So don't feel like you're out there on your own. And the best way just to get more familiar and comfortable is to do Ledge Day, because you're partnered with people from WWRC or that have done it before. But also just remembering, especially if you're in your district, you're a constituent. And in their eyes, you are an expert and they need information from you. They want to learn from you. And so that's really great. And if what happens is they have their own thoughts and needs. So if they ask you for information, provide that information and use it to build the relationship that you want to be able to build on as you move forward. With that, we're going to turn it to Jen Papich just to help, close this out with any last thoughts. And if you have questions we didn't speak to, be sure to put them in the chat.
Wow, so much information. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to Roxanne, Mary, Paul, Brian, Tiffany, and Doug. This is a rock star committee and they do so much work for the association. A lot of this work seems, like we've said before, overwhelming and intimidating to a lot of our association members, and they do this so well and make it so easy for us to understand and are such great advocates. And I know that they have done a ton of work leading up to this legislative session. I cannot thank you guys enough for all of your work. We have a couple other webinars leading up to Legislative Day that are coming up next week. If you go just to the main WRPA page, they're on the right-hand column there if you want to sign up for any more of the trainings leading up to Legislative Day. And again, just to reiterate on what they already said, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the value of relationship building with legislators and doing it in such an unintimidating way, because you're doing it with a group of Parks and Recreation professionals. Like Mary said, you can just be a shadow and learn this first year, but just your presence there, the impact that we can have as an association, being viewed as a collaborative voice of Parks and Recreation in Washington State, advocating for whatever our issues are and educating legislators on the impact that bills have and other issues for Parks and Recreation professionals is huge. So please don't be overwhelmed or intimidated by Legislative Day. Register and sign up. And like Mary said, if this is your first year, don't feel like you have to be right on the spot. You can just look and learn. And then as the day goes on, you'll be willing to step up and be more a part of it. So thank you guys all for attending this session. And thank you again so much, Roxanne, Paul, Mary, Brian, Doug, Tiffany. You guys are rock stars. Thank you so much. And Roxanne, I'll just hand it over to you to say any final words before we head out.
Great. Thank you very much, Jen. Again, hopefully that you got value out of this, that it's got you thinking and hopefully feeling more comfortable and not overwhelmed. One thing that I learned from fundraising is they always say, substitute pride for apology. If you do need to go ask for things, just be proud, because we do contribute so much to the quality of life. And I think elected officials see that and they feel that. And often they're excited to work with us, right? Compared to rules and regulations and restrictions and some of the other elements of that they have to deal with and make tough decisions on. So usually they find it pretty enjoyable to find somebody who's asking them to do exactly what their heart has them wanting to do. So if there's anything that we can do to help you in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to sign up for Ledge Day, it's January 20th, so the registrations need to be happening, now, so that you get in there. You'll actually get a link to do a pre-training just to really explain what that experience is from WWRC. And then there's also some opportunities to listen to legislatures talk about capital budget and outdoor recreation. So anything that just gets it more familiar, more comfortable, that's what we're about with you. And we appreciate your diligence. It took you a little bit longer, about 10 minutes more. Hopefully you found it beneficial. And if you need anything from any one of us, don't hesitate to ask. All right. Thank you all. Hopefully it's an amazing session. And if you need anything, we look forward to hearing from you. Take care.